Jeffrey. I'm very high on him. I need to see more from a guy like Mac Hollins. You have to have another guy rise up and take that pressure. I hate to keep saying pressure, but this team's going to be under a lot of pressure. You've got to have other guys rise up and take some of that pressure off. Burton's gone out of the tight end. Remember the Philly special? Well, the guy that threw that pass, he's gone. Now you've got Zach Ertz and newly drafted tight ends. So you've got pieces there that I'm really excited about. But Justin, what I'm most excited about is that our defense, which was great last year, is getting guys back from injury. I don't know that it's really a worse Eagles team. I hate to tell people, but with guys coming back from injury and some of the moves they made, yeah, it's a different team, Justin, like you said, but I'm not sure it's a worse team.
Well, as an Eagles fan, how patient do you feel they can be with Carson Wentz?
You have to be patient. Look, you're now a Super Bowl champ, so the monkey's off your back, at least for a while. No one's going to expect you to repeat. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. So I really, really hope, because I believe that Carson Wentz is the future in Philadelphia, that if things are a little bit rocky at the beginning of the season, and look, they might be. They've got Atlanta in week 1. They've got Andrew Luck and the Colts in week 3. Minnesota, week 5. I mean, there's tough games here. Cam Newton in Carolina, week 7. There's tough games here on this schedule. It's not going to be an easy road to go down at the beginning of the season. So if Carson Wentz is still sitting, I still say that you don't put him in, even if you're losing ball games, until you're ready. And if that means that you don't make the playoffs this year or you limp into the playoffs, so be it. You have to let that ride out because you're now defending Super Bowl champions. It's okay. The worst thing you could do is have Wentz go out too early and tear up that same knee or even the other knee. And where are you at then? Starting over again next year.
Yeah, they definitely have to take care of Carson Wentz. And Doug Peterson, even this past weekend, got pretty testy when continuing to be asked about it. And he's kind of preached the same message of that they check him every day. When he's ready, he's ready. And they're not going to make any major moves to try to rush him back and get him hurt because he's your future for the next 12 to 15 years, depending on how long he wants to play, because he's only shown that he seems to just be getting better and better and better. And just the type of teammate and person he is, he's the guy that you want there under center for a long time. Everybody's freaking out because Nick Foles hasn't looked great in the preseason, but there's a lot of guys that haven't looked great in the preseason, and you really don't know what the team's trying to do, what they're trying to focus on, what concepts, how much game planning is getting put in. Usually it's not a lot. It's very vanilla schemes. You don't want to show what you're really trying to do. So I think they'll be fine, even if they don't play Wentz for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. I think just like you alluded to with how deep this roster really is, even the players that they lost, they really didn't lose anybody that they didn't have a replacement for or go out and get better at. And even adding a guy like Mike Wallace to their receiving core is a move that no one talks about. And all of a sudden now they have a deep threat to go with Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar, who do a lot of their damage underneath or across the middle. Now you have a guy that can give them relief by being their deep threat. So the guy they might have lost that hurt the most was Trey Burton when you have situations with Zach Ertz when he went down, but they went into the draft and they were able to go get a tight end. So I just think they didn't get any worse this offseason. They have a ton of depth on this team, and we'll talk about that really when we get to the NFC North and why that's so important. They are in that window with Carson Wentz still under his rookie deal where he doesn't have that $24, $27, $30 million that's banging on their salary cap right now. He's on a rookie deal. That gives them the flexibility financially to keep a roster filled with guys and keep depth on this team. So the Eagles' window to win is really these next few years before Wentz is going to be up to sign his big extension. And that's when things will get to the point where you've seen these teams that have to do that. They have to make a lot of sacrifices on their roster to keep that quarterback. So these are the next 3 years are going to be the Eagles' years where they have really got to capitalize on having a rookie quarterback or having a quarterback that's on that rookie wage scale, because it offers them so much financial flexibility, and you can see it paying off for that roster and how deep it is. So, Eric, coming off a 13-3 year, Vegas obviously sees some of the questions at the quarterback position as well. They've set the over-under at 10.5. So where do you think the Eagles land in 2018, 2019?
All right, Justin, I'm going to surprise you a little bit, not because I'm down on my Eagles. I would love it if they won 11 or 12 games, I don't think they will. I think I'm going to take the under at 10 because I think their schedule is pretty tough. I also think the interdivisional games are going to be tough as well. Look, I know that I said Washington's going to be about 6-10, but I could be completely wrong on that. Alex Smith could shine. AP could really work out. Who knows? Maybe they come out hot. Dallas and New York, I think, are going to be better than they have been last year. And so I think it's going to be tough. Then you open up the season for Philly with Atlanta. Like I said, week 3 with Indianapolis, Minnesota, Carolina. Then they're at Jacksonville. There's a lot of tough games in the beginning of this season before they have their bye and then get into the meat of their divisional schedule. So, Justin, I feel good at 10. I would love 11 or 12, but I can't bet on it.
Wow, I'm surprised at that. I didn't think you would go under on that. There's a lot of question with Wentz. So if this is a situation where he doesn't play till 6 weeks in, I might reserve the right to change this. But right now, I got to take the over still. Now, I don't think they're going to get to 13 like they did last year. I think they'll be closer to 11 just because the schedule is tougher. They do have a first-place schedule. That means you get the NFC South plus the 2 division winners from last year in both the North and the West. So they're going to have a pretty tough schedule. But again, they won 13 games last year, and many of those they won pretty convincingly. So I think that they'll find a way to win 11. Again, that's if Wentz is back, let's say week 2 or 3. If he's week 5, 6, 7, and Foles is behind center, I could see them, the way this schedule shakes up, that they could be 3-3, 2-4, something like that, and make it a lot harder. But when you look at this roster, just how deep it is, and the fact that Wentz is a top 5 quarterback in this league right now based off what he did last year, I got to think that they can win 11 games. So I'll stick with the over. But again, if Wentz is delayed or the Eagles aren't giving us all the information, they really don't have a plan to put him into week 5, 6, maybe 7, something like that, then I might have to go back through and change on that one, Eric. So that's a wrap for the NFC East and a wrap for segment 1. So when we come back, we'll jump into segment 2 and we'll talk about the NFC North. This is a very interesting division as well. There's a team in there that Eric really likes with some of the moves they have made. There's also a very hyped up quarterback that Eric and I will talk about. Is he being overhyped at this point in his career? We'll talk about that and more when we come back. Welcome back for segment 2. It's time to look at the NFC North and take a deep dive into this division. And let's start with the Chicago Bears. They're coming off a 5-11 season, but they had a pretty busy offseason. They make the head coaching change, get rid of John Fox. They bring in a Kansas City Chiefs disciple and Matt Nagy. And then they go out and are pretty active in the free agent market, bringing in Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, and then Trey Burton from those Eagles we just talked about to finish up in segment 1 there, Eric. But I think the bigger question for this team is last year they make the surprise move up in the draft to the number 2 position back in the 2017 draft and take Mitchell Trubisky out of nowhere. The same draft that saw behind that pick, you saw Deshaun Watson go off the board and Patrick Mahomes go off the board. Both have received way more hype, and there's way more expectations on this year than there is on Trubisky. But Eric, the Bears, they're in a rebuild mode. They seem to be very high on Trubisky. They've talked about turning him loose more this year. So coming off a 5-11 season with a coaching change, with all the changes to this roster, what constitutes a successful season for Mitchell Trubisky?
I think if he can stay upright all year, complete a bunch of passes, have a slightly higher QBR than he had last year, and get them to 7 wins, to me, those are all measurable goals that I think would be a success for this team. I actually am one that thinks that he's about to break out. Now he's got some weapons at wide receiver. I think Trey Burton is ready to be a star tight end in this league. Who knows what Howard will do at running back, if that's going to be the future of this team or not. I think there's other options there, even at running back, that this team's going to be playing around with. But for me, I think Trubisky is at that point where it's time to put up or shut up. And I know he's a young quarterback, so I don't want to make that seem too severe. But I think I put him on the put-up side. I think he's going to have a fantastic year, and I think he's going to open up a lot of eyes, much the same way that maybe a Jared Goff did when a lot of people had written Goff off, myself included, and then he comes back under new coaching and has a fantastic season last year. So I'm all in on Trubisky until I see otherwise, But the beauty of this team, and we've talked about it with some of the AFC teams, is that they have Chase Daniel at a backup quarterback. And I think Chase Daniel is good enough to push Trubisky along, meaning that if Trubisky was struggling for 5 weeks and 6 weeks and 7 weeks, I think Nagy's not going to hesitate to put Daniel in. Even Daniel has looked good in the preseason. So I think that is something that motivates Trubisky and moves the needle for him. Justin, I'm looking for this team to be a lot better than they were last year.
Wow, so you think if Trubisky struggles early on in the first half of the season that they could make a quarterback change?
Well, I don't think they will, but I think it'll be talked about. Because that's the society that we live in. We're always reactive to everything. And if it wasn't Chase Daniel and there wasn't somebody as serviceable there, I don't think that would happen as quickly. But with a guy like Chase who's had a good preseason, he's been under some coaching, he has the right tools, the pressure is more there. It's one of those things where you kind of wait and see where you're at with this. But Trubisky he's on that sink or swim line right now. And that's why I move more toward if we're in week 7 or week 8 and he's struggling, maybe they pull him out a little bit. I mean, look, your Broncos did that with Paxton Lynch for a while and Osweiler and, sure. in and out. And so I don't think any young quarterback's really ever safe if the coaches feel like there's something there that could motivate him, whether it's having him sit for a few games or whatever the case may be. So I'm not going to just say that he's totally safe yet, but I also think that I believe in him and he's going to have a better year than last year. So once we see what he does with Robinson, once we see what he does with Gabriel, even Kevin White, there's pieces there that I think help him develop into either the quarterback he's going to be or the quarterback that he can't be. And that's why I think by week 7 or 8, we're going to have sort of a measure on that.
And really, that's the reason that I came up with this question was simply because the fact that I don't know that you can measure Trubisky's success in wins or losses. I think it has to look a lot like what Deshaun Watson did last year in his games and his 7 starts. And we talked about that last week on the show, that he was only 3-4 in those starts, yet he was one of the most hyped guys that we have seen in a while in terms of a rookie. There was just so much hype. It was almost like a Jeremy Lin type situation with Watson from an NFL versus an NBA type of comparison, where this guy came in and once he got behind center and the more he started, the better statistics he kept putting up and just throwing bombs and just huge stat lines and these monster fantasy games and monster daily fantasy games with all the bonuses that he was hitting. Just that hype was there. So I think for Trubisky, this is, again, a team that's rebuilding. They've put a lot of pieces in place. They have a lot of young parts and new pieces. So, again, they only won 5 games last year. So to think that he's going to come out in this division, this North Division, and find a way to get to 500, I think might be overselling what this roster can do. But I think, to your point, he just has to come in and play a lot better. Statistically, he has to be an accurate quarterback. He can't go out and turn the football over. And he's got to be a guy that looks like he can lead his team and go out and win some football games, that if they're behind, he can bring them back, that he can put some points up on the board. I don't think he always has to win games, but he has to look similar to what Watson did last year, that he is a competent quarterback that can lead this offense, and he's got the firepower around him that I don't think there's a lot of excuses that he can come out sort of like last year where they had a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position. They didn't have a lot around him. This year they do. Even the fact that they're not really relying on Kevin White the way they have, if he can give them anything to go along with Allen Robinson and what we've seen from Taylor Gabriel and even the flashes that we saw from Trey Burton in Philly, he's got the pieces around him where there's not a lot of excuses. So I think, to your point, look, we've seen it before. We've seen it in Denver where Paxton Lynch really hasn't even gotten on the field because every time he's gotten a chance either in preseason or to get a spot start, he just hasn't looked good. So I think you're correct there. Chase Daniel is sort of a career backup, but he's been a guy that sat behind Drew Brees. He was a guy the Eagles brought in to help Doug Peterson install the offense there. And he's such a high-paid backup that a lot of teams can't afford him because he's got that price tag, I think, north of about $7 million on your cap. So when you have a young quarterback, you can bring in a really good backup. And then if you have an issue where he goes down, you're not strapped like some of these other teams. So, Eric, the over-under that Vegas has set, they've upped the mark. They like what the Bears have done as well. Again, the Bears 5-11 last year. Vegas has the over-under set at 6.5. So you're going over or under for the Chicago Bears.
Wow, Vegas has a good line there, 6.5, but I'm going to take the over just barely. I'll take the 7. The Bears have a tough schedule. I think interdivisionally, it's also going to be tough, just like we talked about with the NFC East. The benefit that the NFC North has is they get some games against that AFC East. And our listeners know I'm not too high on where Miami and Buffalo and even my Jets are going to be,